In recent years, we have seen a wave of private companies publicly stating their ambitions to contribute to net zero. Aviva announced our own intention to be a net zero company by 2040 last year. Some organisations are also publishing plans to support their targets. Again, we brought out our first plan earlier this year. On the face of it, this is excellent progress. Dig below the surface, however, and we can see that current plans vary in quality and consistency and often lack detail on how targets will be achieved. I know from Aviva's own experience that developing a high-quality transition plan is challenging. Without it, the progress we make will be fractured and inconsistent. We will be flying blind. But with detailed transition plans, which act like any other business tool, we can all make the progress the world needs us to. They can help leadership teams guide their organisation through a complex transformation. They provide an opportunity to open a dialogue with governments, highlighting the policy action needed to support you in reaching your climate ambitions. They're also a key tool for society, as they allow investors, governments and NGOs to hold company boards and management to account. In short, they're a key building block for delivering a low-carbon future, a future I'm not sure we can achieve without them. Building on the excellent work done by both GFANZ and the ISSB, the TPT framework will help ensure that everyone has a shared and consistent understanding of what is needed. That is why we are delighted to be launching these documents today. I urge anyone who is serious about making a real contribution to a low-carbon future to take a good look at them and understand how they can help your own progress. And to all those preparing 2023 transition plans, sign up for the TPT Sandbox online and give us your feedback directly. Transparency and collaboration is what this is all about. So please do have a go, and together we might just crack it.
1 year after the government's historic promise at COP26 to make transition plans mandatory, we welcome the task force's robust guidance, as voluntary approaches are not enough. The nature and climate crises are two sides of the same coin. We won't solve either unless we tackle both. So requiring companies to disclose the links between their emission reduction plans and nature is an important first step towards world-leading integrated guidance. The task force's framework and guidance can set a global example at COP27 for both governments and businesses alike.
As investors, we're increasingly calling for standardised, high-quality transition plans to make better informed decisions about how to allocate capital. Equally, understanding how the companies in which we invest are transitioning is a critical element of delivering on our own net zero commitment. At Elgin, we're already assessing and engaging with over 1,000 companies through our Climate Impact Pledge, which is now in its 6th year. We understand that many organisations find it challenging to develop and disclose transition plans without sufficient guidance. The Transition Plan Task Force work will enable consistent and comparable reporting of plans, providing financial institutions and companies with the tools they need to credibly transition to a zero carbon economy. The framework builds on the UK government's leadership on disclosure. As an example, the UK was the first country to commit to making climate reporting aligned with the TCFD mandatory. We hope that by continuing this leadership, the TPT will also have significant influence internationally, acting as a gold standard approach to implementing the ISSB's global baseline for private sector climate reporting.
ESG strategy supports the role of finance in delivering a market-led transition to a much more sustainable economy. We strongly welcome today's publication of the Transition Plan Task Force Disclosure Framework and Implementation Guidance. The FCA has been actively involved in the development and drafting of these initial outputs. We look forward to using the final outputs as we move to strengthen our transition plan disclosure expectations of listed companies and regulated firms.
My name is Kate Levick and I jointly lead the TPT Secretariat team with Ben Caldecott. Over the past few months, our team has been working with the TPT members who represent finance, business and civil society to develop the outputs which we are now launching for consultation. The two documents which we are publishing are the Disclosure Framework, which is a sector-neutral framework with recommendations for companies and financial institutions to develop gold standard transition plans, and the Implementation Guidance, which sets out the steps companies could take to develop a transition plan, as well as when, where and how to disclose their plan. Many organisations are beginning to develop transition plans, some as part of existing FCA reporting requirements. The TPT's work will inform future regulation, and the FCA has been closely involved in the TPT's work. We want to use this opportunity to give you a brief overview of the TPT's recommendations. Let's kick off with the framework. This document covers 4 areas. We provide a transition plan definition, 3 guiding principles, recommendations for taking a strategic and rounded approach to transition planning, and a framework that covers the 5 elements and 19 sub-elements that we believe a transition plan should include. A transition plan is integral to an entity's overall strategy, setting out its plan to contribute to and prepare for a rapid global transition towards a low greenhouse gas emissions economy. The TPT recommends that good practice transition plans should cover an entity's high-level ambitions, such as any decarbonisation targets it may have set, the short, medium and long-term actions it plans to achieve these ambitions, governance and accountability mechanisms that support the delivery of the plan, and finally, measures that the entity is taking to address situations where its transition plan may lead to material risks to the natural environment, as well as impacts on workforce, supply chains, communities or customers. We recommend that entities develop plans that reflect the urgency to act. This means they should be informed by the ambitions enshrined in international climate agreements, as well as any national commitments made by jurisdictions in which they operate. We set out 3 core principles that should guide transition planning. First, ambition. A transition plan should be ambitious and should show how an entity intends to contribute to and prepare for an early and orderly economy-wide transition. Secondly, action. A transition plan should be action-oriented, focusing on the concrete actions over the short term and striving for resilience. This means entities should test their underlying assumptions and seek to mitigate delivery risks where possible. And accountable. A transition plan needs to be accountable, meaning that the entity has created robust governance mechanisms to support the plan and regularly reports on its progress.
In addition, we strongly recommend that organisations take a strategic and rounded approach in developing their transition plans. This means that companies and financial firms should consider the full range of levers at their disposal to contribute to and prepare for an economy-wide transition to net zero. This will help avoid the potentially unintended consequences, such as selling fossil fuel assets rather than planning for their managed phase-out. This approach is embedded throughout the disclosure framework. Entities who align their disclosures with TPT recommendations will be taking a strategic and rounded approach. Based on these considerations, we have developed a framework that has 3 layers. At the very top, we see the 3 core principles, which should guide every aspect of transition planning. Building on these principles, entities should embark on an iterative transition planning journey, the stages of which are outlined in the implementation guidance we're publishing today. The 3rd layer is the actual disclosure framework, the 5 core elements that we recommend entities cover in their transition plans. And these are foundations, implementation strategy, engagement strategy, metrics and targets, and finally, governance. People that are watching this space closely will notice that the elements we set out correspond directly to the 5 components recommended by GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, and their work on transition plans. This was very much an intentional decision to make sure that our framework aligns neatly with emerging international best practice.
Beneath these 5 elements, we've provided specific disclosure recommendations for 19 sub-elements of a credible transition plan. At every step of our drafting, we have sought to ensure that we are directly building on the existing and emerging international standards. In developing the framework, we therefore directly built on the recommendations provided by the TCFD, which forms the current basis for climate-related disclosure requirements in the UK. In addition, we're building on the draft standards provided by the ISSB, which are expected to form the basis for future disclosure rules. We have used the same element structure as GFANZ to ensure that our frameworks click together.
In parallel to publishing the framework today, we're also launching the first draft of our implementation guidance. This aims to bring our recommendations to life. The implementation guidance covers 4 main areas. Firstly, we provide guidance on stages and process steps that entities may follow in preparing their plan, moving from baselining their current position to setting ambition, to developing an action plan, and finally ensuring accountability. In this section of the report, we also signpost to some of the excellent guidance and frameworks provided by other initiatives. Secondly, we set out recommendations for when, where, and how to disclose a plan. In a nutshell, we recommend that companies prepare a standalone plan every 3 years. And in the interim years, we recommend that companies provide annual updates on their progress as part of their existing TCFD or ISSB aligned climate-related disclosures. And they should do this in their annual financial report. Thirdly, this document provides further guidance to aid the interpretation of each sub-element of our framework. This includes an overview of how each sub-element builds on the existing guidance provided by the TCFD, as well as interpretive guidance that adds some more color around each recommendation. Finally, we end with an overview of the different use cases for transition plans. This chapter showcases the wide range of different audiences who might be interested in transition plans. This can include organizations using plans as an internal tool to manage the transformation of their businesses, or financial institutions seeking to understand the differences between different companies or to set out their own transition plan. But plans are also relevant for civil society organizations seeking to hold companies and financial institutions to account, as well as governments, supervisors, regulatory authorities who want to monitor firm-level progress as well as economy-wide progress towards achieving net zero. For those who want to see the details, we've also provided a technical annex. This annex contains precise mapping of how each TPT sub-element relates to the relevant recommendations from the TCFD and the ISSB. So, how can you get involved? We encourage all stakeholders to engage with these draft publications. You can take part in our consultation. You can do that via our website. The consultation is open until the 28th of February, 2023. We also want to hear from companies who have already prepared or are currently preparing their first transition plans. And what we've also done is launched a new sandbox where preparers can provide feedback on their experiences implying some or all of the framework and guidance. This gives access to a community of practice on transition plans, and we're really excited about where that sandbox involving users and preparers around the world will go. And we look forward to hearing your views and your feedback. Thank you.